Alright, hey guys, today we're looking at a pretty different clone console. Unlike the other ones that we looked at, this one actually supports 3 systems. So this one will actually play NES games, Super Nintendo games, and Sega Genesis games. Inside the box you'll receive a set of AV cables. These are very standard cables, so you can find them just about anywhere and they're cheap and easy to replace. You'll also receive an ultra compact power adapter, which is much smaller than the one that comes with the Super Nintendo. And you'll also receive 2 controllers to get you started. It seems like the newer versions are wired for Super Nintendo to go along with the Super Nintendo design, but from what I've seen in other reviews and the promotional material, it originally came with Super Nintendo controllers that ended in a plug for the Sega Genesis. They still work on the system, but it was a little bit weird, so I'm glad they changed that. And the start and select buttons are actual buttons. It's weird. The original Super Nintendo controller had the buttons as a weird kind of rubbery thing, but I kind of like them as being actual physical buttons. The rest of the controller is pretty good too. Feels pretty on par with most other third-party controllers. And now onto the main system. It comes in 2 main colors, silver and black and red and black. I picked the red and black. Not my favorite shade of red, but it still looks pretty cool. The system itself is actually really light, lighter than a Super Nintendo and even lighter than an NES. Kinda surprising since it combines those 2 and another console. And on the front you have 2 controller ports for each of the main system it supports, as well as a region switch which is mainly for the Genesis. Alright, enough staring at this thing, let's go ahead and see how it handles some games. And as you can see, it's pretty much running flawlessly. This is 60 FPS right here. It's running on composite through a cheap upscaler and it still looks pretty good. But just like with my real SNES, my capture card records a little bit dark, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to S-Video and try boosting the contrast and brightness. And wow, just like with a real Super Nintendo, the S-Video cable really clears up the picture. Most TVs have contrast and brightness settings. That will help improve your picture a little bit too. But playing a simple fighting game is easy. Let's try something a little bit more difficult. How about Mode 7? Let's try F-Zero. It handles F-Zero like a champ, and I actually didn't notice any input lag. If there was any, I'd be in big trouble. But I managed to have absolutely no problems during this race. Okay, well how about games with enhanced chips? Well, Kirby 3, play like a dream. Okay, well how about SuperFX chip games? Nope, starFox also plays just fine. Was this game you want to play never released in America and only Japan? Well, this thing plays it just fine too. No problems. So if you're mainly looking to play some Super Nintendo games, this actually plays them very well. And you get this brand new for less than a used Super Nintendo online. But as with any clone system, there are going to be some drawbacks. The first one is sound quality. I noticed the sound quality, especially some games, is actually not very good. Let's go ahead and take a listen. Here's what this game sounds like on the RetroTRIO. And here's what it sounds like on the Super Nintendo. Exact same game, exact same cartridge. Now this is understandable. The Super Nintendo had a dedicated sound processor made specifically for them by Sony, so it would be really hard to emulate such specific hardware, but still, it sounds pretty noticeably bad. I can guarantee most people who haven't played a Super Nintendo before and just want to play the games won't care, and they probably won't even notice, but for people who spend a lot of time on a Super Nintendo, it's a little bit noticeable. Luckily it's not like that in all games. Here's another example. But hey, if it doesn't bother you at all, it's not a big deal, and turning down the volume does help. But anyway, moving on, there is one other kind of disappointing thing about this unit. It doesn't seem to support the multitap adapter, so if you're looking to have a big bomb ram party, you'll be stuck with a maximum of 2 players, which is kind of disappointing. But it's also to be expected. After all, the multitap is not an official Nintendo accessory. However, some other unofficial devices like the Super UFO work just fine. And by using the Super Game Boy, you can add one more system to what your Super RetroTRIO can play. They also make a special adapter for Game Boy Advance games that doesn't work on Game Boy or Game Boy Color games, but I don't have that with me to test. Alright, now let's talk NES. If you try to switch straight from S-Video Super Nintendo back to NES, you may notice an issue. The first couple times I tried to run my NES on S-Video, I ran into this issue where it's all black and white. Eventually I was able to get it in color, but it's pretty clear the NES doesn't natively support S-Video, and neither does this unit. It's playable, but it does look kind of worse than composite, so I definitely suggest sticking with composite if you're going to be playing the NES. And while I don't have a ton of NES games to test, the ones I did test actually worked out pretty well, although I did have a few minor issues with one game. While playing Metal Gear, the ground pattern would flicker quite a bit. It wasn't anything that would keep me from being able to play the game, but it was a little bit annoying. The only game that wouldn't run at all was a Duck Hunt Mario Bros. Combo cartridge. When I tried to start that up, I got the exact same weird pattern thing you get if you try to start up the NES portion with no game in it whatsoever. Now let's move on to Genesis. I only own one Genesis game and I bought it specifically for this review, so let's go ahead and see how it plays. It starts up just fine, and as far as I can see there are no issues playing the game. And just like with the NES games, you can play using a Super Nintendo controller, which is really nice. Another really cool thing about the system is you can actually load up all 3 slots at the same time and just have them occupy it. And then when you want to go play your game, all you have to do is manually switch the power switch to whatever console you want to play. And if your Sega Genesis game supports multiple regions, simply flipping the switch on the front of your console will allow you to play in multiple versions of the game. Alright, that's all I got for now. Hopefully when I get more Sega Genesis and NES games, I can make an add-on to this video that will explain more in depth how those games work. But until then, thanks for watching guys, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.